Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're just going to give it a minute while people start to join. Good morning, everyone. We'll just go ahead and get started. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today for our winery water quality webinar. My name is Lisa Francioni and I'm with the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance. Just a couple quick housekeeping things. This is set up as a webinar, so if you have any questions, you can always use the Q&A or the chat feature. And we're also going to be recording this and sharing it afterwards, so you can always reference back to that as well. Okay, so as a quick agenda, I'm going to share just a really quick background on the water tool that we'll mostly be talking about this morning. And then after that, Noelle Kremers from Wine Institute is going to be talking about the Statewide Winery Order and giving kind of a high-level overview of that, since that's really a key element to, the tool's use for wineries within California. And then we will have Margaret Wild and Bob Kroback from Kennedy Jenks actually walk us through the tool, how to use it, how to really assess the best management practices applicable for your winery. And then we'll have Q&A at the end, but please feel free to use the Q&A throughout the discussion as well, where we can stop and answer questions along the way as well, but wanted to save some time at the end. So it's just a quick background. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance, but for those of you who are not, we're an alliance between Wine Institute and the California Association of Wine Grape Growers. And we have a whole array of activities that we do, but the foundation of our entire sustainable wine growing program is our Code of Sustainable Wine Growing. It's a very comprehensive self-assessment tool. We're now in our 4th edition, so it's an evolving manual for best management practices. We also host an array of educational workshops, including ones like this webinar today. We also develop a lot of resources and tools, which we'll talk about some of the water ones relevant to today's conversation. And we really work closely with a lot of different partners and experts around the state, from academics to different organizations and consultants, to really make sure that we are bringing together the best available information about any sustainability topic and providing that back to the wine industry. And we also have a third-party certification program. So I know some of you on today are actually certified to our Certified California Sustainable Wine Growing Program. So, being in California, of course, part of sustainable wine growing really focuses on water, both in the vineyard and, of course, in the winery. And so over the past 20 years, we've developed a whole range of tools related to winery water use, in addition to tools related to vineyard water use. And so I'm just going to walk through a couple of these and really try to discuss how they relate to today's conversation about this new integrated water quality tool that we have. And all of these tools really build upon each other and really attempt to fill gaps that we've seen over the years. And that's really what this new integrated tool is also designed to do, is really fill some gaps. So as I mentioned, our Code of Sustainable Wine Growing is a very comprehensive self-assessment tool. If you haven't done a self-assessment, I highly encourage you to start there, especially if you start with the winery water chapter, just because it really gives you a sense of what are the sustainability practices that we're talking about when we're talking about winery water. You can actually sign up for an online account on our website, sustainablewinegrowing.org, or you could download a PDF as well from our website. Our sustainability metrics are really built off of that self-assessment, where we're trying to link actual practices with performance. So this is looking at, are you actually measuring your water use, not just talking about the different practices that you're using. And so, our water use metric for wineries is really trying to get to what are the number of gallons of water used per gallon of wine made or case of wine made. And for anyone who is actually certified to our program, any winery has to be tracking that and measuring that every year, in addition to their energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. And then we developed, and Bob was very instrumental, who's going to be talking about our tool today, in developing our comprehensive water guide, which was released back in 2009. It was based on decades of research, really pulling together information around water efficiency, cleaning and sanitation practices, different elements of source control, and then of course, processed water treatment. And so for any of you who've seen this guide, it's very detailed. We have printed out binders that we shared through a series of workshops that are, very couple inches thick, but it's a great resource for really diving deep into winery water use. Several years later, we actually developed our sustainable water management handbook, really designed for small wineries, or really just anyone who doesn't have the time or resources to dedicate a lot of time to looking at their water use. And so these are both great tools to really look at how do you assess your management of source and processed water. And then they really provide some great actionable guidance as well. And then a number of years later, we, through another project that we're working on, realized that it would be great to have really step-by-step instructions on how you can go about identifying where are you using your highest water using activities. So, is it in your baler room? Is it in your cleaning and sanitation? And really helping wineries walk through those steps. And in the end, really finding out what is your overall facility water balance. And the idea behind this is to really be able to focus your improvement opportunities on those specific hotspots. So you're really, taking your limited time and resources and focusing on the areas that are really going to give you the most bang for your buck for improvements. And this tool was actually developed through an economic project that we had, where we were really trying to look at the cost and benefits of implementation of sustainable wine growing practices. And so we have a related budgeting tool to really look at how do you estimate the cost of not only acquiring water, but using it. And I think very importantly, how you disposing of your water and what are the associated costs there. And so that leads us to the tool that we're here to talk about today. And there's a number of really drivers behind this tool. One of them is that the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance, we get a lot of different grants to try to really focus and target on specific sustainability areas. And we've had one for the past couple of years, really focused on regulatory compliance and recognition. And the whole idea behind this grant project is to really help growers and vintners comply with the many environmental regulations that we know are out there, and really increase the use of sustainable best management practices. And then in addition to that, really try to seek recognition opportunities that really give growers and vintners credit for all of the sustainability work that they're already doing in this area, to help simplify compliance, and then to also reduce wine grower burden. So that's been our focus for a number of years. Simultaneously with this grant, the Statewide General Winery Order, which Noelle will talk about, was being developed. And we saw this as an opportunity to really think about what guidance and tools can we provide wineries in order to better comply with this new order. And so it's important to know it's not intended to be an actual compliance tool, but it is designed to assist wineries in better understanding your options for how to comply with the order. So one of the key takeaways we're hoping with this webinar this morning is for you to really understand how you can use this tool, and how you can use this tool to really understand the new order and what your options are there. And then finally, another key element was really trying to create an interactive and easy to use resource. As you saw, we've, over the past 20 years, developed a lot of information and resources over water use, but we are really looking at a way, how do we integrate all of these tools rather than, you as someone working at a winery going through each of these tools individually, how do we really bring the best information from those tools together, organize it in a way that's really understandable so you can walk through and really get a great sense of your operation. And so the key, as you'll see, as Margaret and Bob talk about the tool itself, is it's really designed to help you identify what are the areas within your operation you can make improvements, actually plan for those, and then implement those specific best management practices related to your water quality. So that's a really quick overview. You can find all of those tools and resources on our sustainablewinegrowing.org website. We have a really great interactive online resource library now, if you've never seen it, where you can actually just search by keywords and find all the related water tools. So please feel free to take a look at those. But for now, I will introduce Noelle from Wine Institute, who is going to be sharing a little bit of a highlight of the new order. And I will just mention that in the follow-up, we'll share these recordings. We'll also share a link to the water boards. Just released some recordings of their overview of the order as well. So if you want a little bit more background, we can share that, and you'll get that in the follow-up email. But I will hand it over to you, Noelle. Let me just stop this. Sorry.
Thanks, Lisa. Bring up the okay. Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. Glad you could join us. I am Noelle Kramers with Wine Institute and wanted to give you a quick overview of the recently adopted new statewide general winery order.
Noelle?
Now this is, yes.
Just, we're seeing like the presenter version, so the slide's pretty small.
Okay.
If you wanted to change it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Is that? Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
So the State Water Board in January adopted a statewide general winery order. So this applies to wineries throughout the state, those that produce between 10,000 gallons of water annually up to 15 million gallons of water annually. The way the regulation works is it applies based on your tier, and each tier has different requirements. So wineries that are producing under 10,000 gallons of processed water annually are exempt. So they have to do nothing under this, and you can, if you're that size, just be glad that you can just listen to my presentation and not worry about it. Those above 10,000, so then 10 to 30,000 in tier 1 and all the way up to 1 million to 15 in tier 4. Each tier has a bit of a different compliance requirement, reporting requirements that I'll walk through. But this is very high level. I'm going to try and get through this very quickly. The document, the order itself is 124 pages long. So I can't cover all of the details. As Lisa mentioned, the Water Board has gone over and done a few workshops last month that they have recordings of, and but really go through the order yourself if you're subject to it. So the implementation timeline is a little bit tricky. Within the order, participants are given 3 years to submit their notice of intent, which requires also a submission of a technical report. Now, that's for unpermitted facilities. So those that are in regions that have winery regional general orders for wineries right now will have a bit of a different time frame. Each region will have different priorities as to how they bring folks into compliance. So you'll have to pay attention to what the region is telling you. But essentially, it will be about 3 years. Some will be sooner, some will be longer if you're covered already, but that's the goal. Then once you submit the NOI as part of your technical report, you will be proposing a compliance schedule that has to show that you'll be in full compliance with the order within 5 years. The regional boards will accept the NOIs, and then they will return an NOA. And once you've received the NOA, then there are a lot of specific deadlines included in the order before that 5 years that you have to follow to be in compliance with the order. Now, the technical report includes a lot of very specific information, and some of the information and that you can use the tool to help you with will be required in the technical report. So you'll have to provide a table with 5 years of historical annual winery effluent flow. So that's important. If you haven't been gathering that data now or previously, start now so that you can have some data available to include in the technical report. A description of your processing operation, a description of your process water collection, treatment, reuse, and disposal system, the chemicals that you're using for processing and cleaning, your process water ponds, land application area, if you have a subsurface disposal system, information about that, your source water quality, winery effluent data, and your solids management system all have to be included in that technical report. Now, those flows can be determined either using a flow meter or the smaller wineries in tier 1 or 2 can calculate flows using an alternative method, but you'll have to work with the regional board to get an approval for that alternative method. Now, the winery order includes a lot of specific requirements about how the winery is managed and how the process water is managed. So for ponds, those of you in tier 1, it's fairly simple. You just have to make sure that your pond is maintaining its integrity and not overflowing and doesn't have structural failure. Now, although a regional board can bump tier 1 facilities up into tier 2 if they have specific water quality concerns. Tier 2, their existing ponds can continue to be operated unlined, but if you install a new pond, then you have to meet the lining and capacity requirements. For tier 3 and 4, both new and existing ponds have to meet that lining and capacity requirement, and then they also have to conduct performance tests to show that the lining is functioning every 5 years. Then if you land apply any solids or processed water, in tier 1, it's fairly simple. It's following the best management practices and making sure that you're not applying when rainfall is expected. But then tier 2 to 4 have specific limits for BOD loading, application limits for agronomic rates, and then rules around processed water solids. Then for those of you that operate a subsurface disposal system, those systems have the most requirements under the order. First off, you cannot have a commingled system under the order unless you get it permitted separately by the regional board. So if you mix domestic water with processed water from your winery, so if you have a tasting room and you have domestic water from that tasting room, that cannot be mixed prior to treatment. It has to be treated separately. You can mix them once it goes out into the leach field, but not before. And then there are discharge flow limits and effluent limits. So total nitrogen effluent limit of 10 milligrams per liter, BOD limit of 300 milligrams per liter, and TSS of 330 milligrams per liter. If you are above any of those limits, then you have to prepare a nitrogen control plan and explain how you're going to bring the operation into compliance with those effluent limits. The state board did adopt an alternative that if a winery with an SDS wants to install a ground monitoring well, and then shows that nitrogen levels are below and nitrate levels are below 10 milligrams per liter, then you're okay and don't have to worry about your nitrogen limit, but you still are subject to the BOD and TSS effluent limit. And if that groundwater monitoring finds that you are above the nitrogen limits, then you have within a year to come into compliance with those effluent limits. Then for tier 4 wineries, there's groundwater monitoring requirements for any subsurface systems, land application area, and ponds. Now for land application areas, you can use a regional groundwater monitoring network as long as it's representative of the winery's operations to meet the groundwater monitoring requirement. Or if your first encountered groundwater is more than 25 feet under the surface, you have drinking water wells and surface water bodies that are more than half a mile away from the land application area, you can apply to get be exempt from the groundwater monitoring requirement. And then with ponds, every pond has to have a groundwater monitoring network unless your total pond capacity is under 1 million gallons. And we have not found wineries in tier 4 yet that have treatment ponds that are under 1 million gallons. So I don't know that exemption will apply to anyone. So if you are in tier 4, know that there will be groundwater monitoring required as part of the order. Then there's a whole monitoring requirement that for tier 2 through 4 and the monitoring and reporting program. There's a model MRP that includes all of the constituents that have to be monitored for in source water, the effluent monitoring pond, and I would recommend that you reach out to any labs that you're using now, if you're doing any of this monitoring, to make sure that they are certified for all of the constituents that are required for monitoring under the winery order. I know I've heard from some wineries who have reached out to their labs and found out that they're not certified for the FDS monitoring requirements. So I would check on that now so that hopefully your lab could get certified by the time you are subject to the monitoring requirements under the order. And then finally, there's reporting requirements. Tier 1 has a very simplified reporting system. Tiers 2 and 3 have an annual report, and then Tier 4 has semi-annual reports in addition to the annual report. So that is a very fast, high-level overview of the winery order. Lisa, I think we were going to take questions at the very end after Bob and Margaret presented, but let me know if you want me to stop now and take some questions beforehand.
Yeah, we can, I think, pause and just see if anyone has any questions. I don't see any yet in the Q&A. Does anyone have any questions about the order? We got one, let's see. Was there a level of wine production rather than water usage for the tiers, I'm assuming?
No, so the tiers are based on your wastewater production, not at all on the amount of wine produced. So there is an opportunity then that if you can improve your efficiency, that you can adjust your tiers and hopefully shift lower, but no, it's based solely on water production, not on wine production.
Great. Any other questions for now? I guess one question I had was, does it mean that each winery will be contacted by their regional water board to know like about their deadlines and their NOI when they're due and stuff?
Yes, so the regional boards are planning to communicate directly with wineries individually. And so those that are under a regional order now, that'll be a simple process. For those that are not, that are in a region that doesn't have a general order, it likely will take a little bit more time for the regional board to reach out. But again, if you're not covered initially and you haven't heard from the regional board and it's getting close to January 2024, I would reach out to them to make sure that you're not going to be out of compliance if you don't submit the NOI by the 2024 deadline.
Great. Okay, well, if there's no other questions for now, please feel free if something pops in. Oh, one other question. Our question is going to be for wineries that choose to hold and haul or discharge to municipal. Will ponds fall under the order?
I have asked that question of the state board and not gotten a very clear answer. I think you'll really have to work directly with the regional board over whether or not you would be subject to the order. Because so if you are on a municipal system and you're discharging to a municipal system, you're not supposed to be subject. And if you hold and haul, you also shouldn't be subject because you're not land applying any water. If you have a pond, though, I think there is a belief that there could potentially be some discharge. And so you'd have to work with the regional board over whether or not there would be discharge and you could be subject to the order. So that will have to be kind of a one-on-one discussion with the regional board.
Great, thank you. Yes, if you think of any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we can ask them at the end. But thank you so much, Noelle. She's been working hard on on the order, so it's nice to get your overview. So I'll introduce Margaret Wild and Bob Kroback from Kennedy Jenks. And they will be the ones to help walk us through the tool. As I mentioned, both of them were involved with both the development of this new integrated tool and then lots of work in winery water use and process water over the years. So I will hand it over to you. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and add them to the Q&A.
Well, thank you, Lisa and Noelle. That was a very good introduction to a very complicated topic and a complicated winery general order. So there is still a lot to be determined going forward in terms of how it will apply to you. So as Lisa and Noel have indicated, that this particular tool, which Margaret will walk you through to some extent in terms of introducing it to you, is really a compilation of a lot of previous work that was done. We also added some additional documentation from, for example, there's some information in the references and so forth for similar programs and documents that were generated, for example, in Canada. So the idea was to have a tool that you could focus specifically for your operations. Just as the winery order laid out different wastewater quantities in terms of figuring out which tier you're in, as we all know, wineries are not identical. There are lots of different operations, lots of different activities that you do. You may do activities at different facilities. So it becomes complicated to understand, you know, what tier you may fall into, and are there some strategies? Because ideally, if you can stay in a lower tier, you have fewer compliance issues to deal with. So that becomes important to understand what your wastewater flows are. And if there are things you can do to reduce those wastewater flows, that helps you in the long run. So those are the kinds of activities that are highlighted in this tool. Similarly, there are constituents in wastewater, and it's the common constituents in winery wastewater are organic matter, and that's measured by a surrogate measurement for organic matter called the biochemical oxygen demand. And it's essentially a laboratory analysis of what the oxygen uptake would be for biological microorganisms and in the amount of oxygen they would consume relative to the amount of organics that are in that wastewater. So certainly any wine or grape juice that happens to be in your wastewater would have organic matter in it. So anything you can do to manage that, reduce that, helps you. Also, nutrients are present in winery wastewater, typically in the form of nitrogen. Usually it's an organic nitrogen. However, the regional board and the state board are concerned that that organic nitrogen can be transformed in the environment to nitrate. And when it's in the nitrate form, that is a concern from a drinking water standpoint. There is a maximum contaminant level for nitrate. And therefore, if there's nitrate present that exceeds 10 milligrams per liter, that's a concern for drinking water supplies in California. That's why their focus is on a total nitrogen of 10 milligrams per liter, which is quite low. The third component of winery wastewater of concern and issue is salinity. And salinity also can be measured by a surrogate parameter called fixed dissolved solids. EC is another method for looking at it, but the regulation is the winery order is based on fixed dissolved solids. Again, that's to not include some of the other measurements that would be present. For example, organic matter can be in the form of organic acids, which can be measured as total dissolved solids, but it's not true salinity. It's an organic matter. So given all of that, anything that a winery can do based on your specific operations to manage and reduce flow, BOD, total nitrogen, or salinity, that gets you in the best position to be able to stay in the tier, the lowest tier possible, therefore reduce your monitoring requirements and reporting requirements. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Margaret to highlight and walk through the tool.
All right, thanks, Bob. So this is the main page of the tool. So what I'm going to do is walk through this at a fairly quick pace. So if you do have any questions, just make sure you type them into the Q&A or the chat, and Lisa will be monitoring that for me. So this is the main page that when you go to the link, you'll see some basic information, most of which Bob just went over. But the overall goal here is to provide one comprehensive place for all the tools that CSWA has been developing. We've actually added another tool here that we'll look at today. So the first step is just keep in mind to don't try to do this on your mobile phone. It's definitely a better format on your PC or on a tablet. So that's just a FYI. So what I'm going to do is hit start here. So this will take us to the how to use page of the tool. There are 3 primary steps of the tool. The first is the learn step. So this goes over all the fundamentals, such as the definition of BOD, salinity, nutrients, the key constituents in winery wastewater that Bob just talked about. So that'll give you a little bit more information on those fundamentals. Also some resources and other locations you can look for more information. So we'll go over that in a little bit of more detail in a moment. Step 2 is the assessment step. So this step will look at a survey that is within this web interface to kind of look at where you are currently with your winery with respect to sustainability and water reuse and chemical use, and kind of get a current status. And then step 3 is the planning step. So this will be an Excel-based tool that I'll show you that provides BMPs for planning for the future and implementing these new BMPs into your system to make your winery more sustainable. So a little bit on mechanics here. So you can see on this main page, there's some basic information. There's also a video that was prepared by CSWA that helps you walk through the tool. So if you forget from today's lesson, just go ahead and watch those videos. They're very helpful. There's a button at the top of each page that either says begin or it might say next or back. You can navigate through the pages. This one says begin, and you can see that button is also down here at the bottom. So I'm going to hit begin, and you can see it's going to take us over here into step 1, learn. So this is the overview page for the learn section. So it gives definitions of organics, salts, nutrients that Bob just went over, also a definition of loading, so the total mass of a constituent in the wastewater stream. Just some basic information like that. So you can scroll down. One thing I'd like to mention is at the bottom of each of these pages, you'll see links to other locations for more information. So in this particular case, there's a link to the comprehensive guide. I'll just click on that so you get an idea. This is that comprehensive guide to sustainable management of winery water from 2008 that Lisa talked about. So you can download it at that link. You'll see in other locations through this tool, we've cut out specific pages or chapters from that guide so we can just reference those sections. So you don't have to flip through the 314-page document to find that information. There's also a link here to water and wine. So this is a tool developed in Canada for wineries that is also very helpful. So that's another item that you can look at on your own time. So, okay, so now I'm going to hit next. This is going to take us into the first main page of step 1, learn. So this is the BOD biochemical oxygen demand page, which is a measure of organic matter. So just to kind of give you an example, this pie chart here shows different sources of BOD within winery wastewater. There's also, if you continue to scroll down, there's a list here that shows winemaking processes that can contribute to solids and BOD. And then continue to scroll down, you can see, again, these links to the comprehensive guide throughout here. And then many of the pages have key questions to consider sections. So which activities in the winery have potential to generate solids, that kind of thing, to start thinking about where BOD is coming from within your facility. So we can hit the next page, and it's going to take you to a similar page for salinity. So you can kind of get the idea here. This box here shows definitions of total dissolved solids, fixed dissolved solids. That's the parameter that needs to be measured for the winery general order, and then also electrical conductivity, just to kind of give you that fundamental information. If this is something you're not really familiar with, it's definitely worth reading through. Pretty good overview of this background information. Okay, so so as far as navigation goes, you can see we're in step 1 here, and then the chapters within step 1 are all listed here on the left. So you can skip to different sections if you're more interested in wastewater sources or sustainability strategies. There's 2 sections there for reuse and recycle, as well as strategies for sustainability. Just to give you an example, and in the interest of time, I'm going to skip to the water use tracking page. So this one I think is really helpful, especially with respect to the new Winery General Order. So this page provides a couple steps for figuring out how much water you use within your winery, if this isn't something that's already monitored at your facility. So step 1, just setting up meters, recording data, understanding how flow meters work and how they can be installed and which one you should pick. So there's some resources here that you can take a look at. One thing I wanted to mention throughout here, there's definitely links to other locations, again, from Water and Wine. One piece, understanding flow meters, as I mentioned, if you click on these red boxes, it'll take you to another location. So I'll click on this one. So this is just an excerpt from the guide. It's a 1-page document, but it provides an easy access just to the one location within that 300-page document for you to take a look at and find that information. Okay, so back to the tool. So there's several steps here under this particular one. This is one of the more in-depth pages. But once you work your way through that and click on all these links to find more information, you could have a good idea of how much water you're actually using in your winery, and you can calculate your wastewater to wine ratio. So you can continue through step 1 and learn when you have some time to go through it. Cleaning and sanitation is another category, defining what clean enough means, some recommendations for alternative cleaning products, also a page on treatment systems. But I did want to mention the last section here, resources. I'll take you there. So this is a very useful page. There's a list of resource sheets 1 through 14 here. These were developed by CSWA, and I'll click on one as an example. So you'll see links to these resource pages throughout the tool. They're very helpful. It's more of a deep dive into specific topics. So you can actually download all of these and keep them if you want. But they provide some basic information. Cleaning chemicals are a primary source of salinity in winery wastewater. So it asks specific questions about how much you're using and how you can reduce that chemical usage within your facility. So that's just one example. There are 14 of them that you can take a look at. Okay, so that's step 1, learn. If you have any, I'll pause there if there's any questions. Looks like there might have been a few in Q&A.
Yes, let's see. There's a question about the order, so we can address that at the end. And then it says, from the CSW main page, where do you surf to this tool? Great question that I should know the answer to. I believe it's under the resources, but I will look and get back to you.
Okay, so we'll follow up with you on that one.
Yeah, I will, sorry, just mention that the URL is very simple. So if you look at the top right here, it's cswawatertool.org. And so that could help, but great question. It should be easy to find. So I will look at that.
Okay, great. All right, so I do recommend setting aside at least an hour, maybe a little bit more, to walk through that step 1, learn. You can skip the different sections. Maybe you're really familiar with some of the background information, but you want to hear more about cleaning and sanitation. You can skip to that section. All of that is doable in this format. Okay, so now I'm going to go to step 2, which is the assessment step. So this is a survey, a web-based survey that you'll work your way through. I'm going to give you an example with a made-up winery. So one thing to keep in mind is your responses are saved in temporary internet files for 15 days. So you can start this, set it aside, and go back to it. There's some information that I'll show you as we walk through it that you should have set aside before you start it. Probably takes maybe 20 to 30 minutes to go through total if you're really thinking about things. Okay, there's this blue box in the bottom right-hand corner. I'll open it in just a second, but you can flip through the pages using the arrows there. There's also a video created by CSWA here at the bottom that you can view after we're off the call today, just to give you a little bit more info on how to walk through the survey. It's pretty simple. All right, so I'm going to open this. So welcome to the Winery Water Quality Assessment Survey. I'm going to hit start here. How to use, again, your answers are stored for 15 days, so you can leave and come back if you need to. So you hit accept here just to say you agree to share responses with CSWA for internal use only. So you do have to give the name of your winery. So I made up this winery. Put in your email address here. We will be sending you, CSWA will send you the automated responses from the survey. So you have them for your documents. And then let's get started. Okay, so part one, this is pretty simple, facility water use. So this kind of information, what's your winery's approximate total annual water use? So I put in a 20,000 gallons a year, which is pretty small, maybe tier one winery. Annual wine production, 3,000 gallons. Make sure it's in gallons. It does give you a conversion from cases here if you need it. And then how much water is used during the crush period? I just said half of it's used during the crush period. The next question is how many days are crush? I said 60 days of crush. Again, this is made up winery. But then it gives you key performance indicators here. So my water to wine ratio is 6 to 1. Of course, that could range from 3 to 1 to 10 to 1. Also, my peak daily water use is 5% of the production volume. So that gives you some basic information. You don't have to jot these down. They'll end up in the email that gets mailed to you at the end. Okay, then we move to part two. So these 9 sections here are different areas of the winery where this tool, we want to make sure you focus on so you can improve sustainability in those areas. So I'm just going to go over the very first one here, but this survey takes you through all 9 of these sections. We're going to stop after section 1, just for reference. So the goal here is they're going to assign a number, priority number, to how you can improve in these specific areas with respect to water reuse, water conservation, that kind of thing. So I'll give you an example. So again, we're under the first activity, wine, grape, or juice receiving. Does the winery receive grapes, wine, and or juice in bins, gondolas? And I'm saying yes, I do at this made up winery. The primary method used the facility receiving is grapes via bins or gondolas. Do you sweep out solids prior to rinsing? I'm going to say no in this case, just as an example. So, and it gives you advice. Go ahead and add this to your procedures. Okay, and then do you wash out your receiving vessels on site? If so, is it done manually or do you have an automated wash out system? I'm going to say yes, we manually wash. So we don't necessarily have a automated system. Do you have high pressure, low flow? I'll say no, just using regular hoses. Do you monitor and record how much water is used per bin? I'm going to say, actually, yes, we do record how much water is used per bin. Are the chemical inputs used for cleaning and sanitizing? I'll say, yes, we definitely use chemicals on a regular basis. And do you monitor or regulate how much chemicals you use? And I'll say, no, we just kind of use them however we need them. So obviously they'll tell you to add that to your procedures. And then last question, do you have written SOPs to minimize water use and chemicals in your facility? And I'll say, no, I don't. Maybe that's why you're in this tool, because you want to develop those. Okay, so then at the end of that first section for receiving, they'll give you a priority score. So our score here is 9. A low score means it's lower priority to start implementing new BMPs. The higher score, higher priority for implementing BMPs in those areas. So we have a pretty high score here because we said no to a lot of things. So this is just an assessment. You're going to walk through the rest of the remaining sections if you're in this survey, and they'll send you hit submit at the end, and CSWA will send you an email that summarizes all of your scores. Okay, so that's section 2. If there's any questions about that section, please let me know.
Doesn't look like it yet.
Okay, great. So let's move to step 3. So once you've done your assessment, you're going to do this planning step, which I think is particularly helpful. So you're going to hit download planning template. You can also use a video here if you need to know how to use it. So this is an external tool developed in Excel. So I'm going to pop it open since I already downloaded it here. And it's going to open to this intro page. Okay, so I do encourage you to probably set aside 15, 20 minutes probably to walk through this. It's pretty easy to navigate. If you're familiar with Excel, you can skip to any tab you want here at the bottom. If you'd rather, there's tabs here at the top you can step through. So the intro just gives you the purpose of the tool. We're going to go to the how to use tool tab, and the tab here just kind of gives you an overview of the different sections of BMPs that are available in this tool. And then I'm going to go to the navigation tab. So one thing useful here, I think, is let's say my made up winery, Wild Winery, does not have a bottling system. So I'm going to take this drop down and hit no here, and that tab will disappear from the bottom. So I don't have to deal with it. I'm not interested in improving my bottling system that doesn't exist. Let's say I also don't have crushing and pressing. So you'll see that tab is B down here, and I hit no, and it will disappear. So you can kind of narrow this down to your particular facility. Also, let's see, so receiving, this is where we did the assessment on this one, and I got a priority score of 9. So I'm going to put that in there because I realize I have lots of things I can improve in my receiving area. And then these other columns are just for when you went through this tool, just so you can document it in case you want to go back to it. So I'll put today's date in here. And then if I need to revisit, there's a drop down. You can say, yes, I need to revisit. You can go back to it, or I'm going to complete it today. You can hit no. Okay. And then these buttons here will take you to the individual tabs. So we'll do that in just one second. Okay. So the remaining tabs, action plan, BMPs in place, we'll go over that at the end. I just want to make sure you understand that I'm just going to walk through one of these. So I would recommend going through the general BMPs across the facility, the BMPs for the receiving area, if crushing and pressing is relevant, barrels, et cetera, step through each one of these. But for now, we're just going to use an example and go straight to the receiving tab. As I mentioned, if you're familiar with Excel, you can just hit the tabs at the bottom, or you can hit the link here. So it'll take you straight there. Okay, so the way this is set up is there is a title for each BMP, a short description, just a phrase or a couple of sentences that describes what the BMP is for you to consider. Also, the constituents that this BMP could help reduce. So salinity, nitrogen, organics, water conservation is what SNOWC would stand for. And then if there's an applicable resource, such as a resource sheet that I showed you back in the web interface tool, you can click on this link. It'll take you back to that resource page, and you can click on resource sheet number 5 to find out more information about the reused wash water BMP here. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an example. So I think I said sweep and segregate solids. I'm going to say, okay, I think we already do this one. So I'm going to hit the blue item here is that you can fill in that information. The red column is what you should select. So you should step through each one of these. So this one, I'm going to say, I actually already have this one in place. We're already sweeping and segregating solids from the bins and gondolas, but I don't do it from tankers and trucks. So I'm going to select will implement on this one. That one I'm really interested in doing. So I'm going to say I'm responsible for doing that. And it's a little too early to do it for crush this year. So let's just say by May 1st of 2022, I'll make sure that gets finished. And then if you have some additional notes on how to implement that, you can put that right in here. So I would recommend stepping through each one of these. Cover receiving area. So this is one where for my made up winery, it just doesn't make any sense for my crush pad. So I'm just going to say not applicable on that one. Automatic bin washing. This one is something I could consider maybe in the future, but I don't necessarily have capital to do that right now or something. So I'll hit will trial. And then let's see, reuse wash water. This is, let's put Bob in charge of this one and see if he can implement that by the end of the year. So implement that one. Okay, So this gives you an idea. I would recommend filling out all of these, even if they're not applicable, stick in the ones that are not applicable. That way you have a full comprehensive list of items that you could implement. Okay, so again, step through each of these tabs. We're just going to do one at the moment. So what we're going to do is go back to the action plan here and hit this button refresh. This is very important. You do have to hit refresh when you go to these tabs so it can upload all the selections you made in the previous step. Just give it 1 second. It takes just a moment to think. There we go. Okay, so this will give you kind of an overall action plan. So these are the ones that I selected as will trial or will implement. So it's sort of a to-do list that you can print off, gives the BMP title, the person responsible, and the target date. You can print this off and keep it on your corkboard as a to-do list. There's a couple other options too. If, when you work your way through this, you'll end up with a really long list. So it's kind of a good way to organize this. If you click on the In Place tab, you can hit refresh. Of course, you can navigate to these tabs here at the top as well. The In Place one, this is the one I said we already do. So you can say, okay, these are the ones that are finished and done, no need to worry about. I'm going to hit the BMPs to trial. So this is my list of items that I want to try in the future. And then, of course, lastly, the BMPs to implement here. So this is sort of my to-do list and when I want to get those targeted items implemented in my facility. Okay, so that's kind of how you work your way through this planning tool. And you can peel this piece off and do it by itself if you want. But let's go back to the main page here. So that's pretty much the whole tool. Again, navigating through it is pretty simple with the back and next here. There's just a ton of resources in here you can download. So walk through it slowly and yeah, I think that's about it. Bob or Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to add while we're looking at this?
I didn't, but I was gonna look at a question here. Bob, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't. I think you covered the basics quite well. And I think the questions and answers will probably reveal some additional comments.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You know, one thing I just thought of is that I did want to mention that we are actually using this tool with a couple wineries right now and trying to get their specific input and feedback. We've definitely had a number of different people who work at wineries look at this during the development of the tool, but now that it's actually a complete package, have people go through it. So if you do go through it soon, please feel free to share any thoughts or feedback with us because we are always making updates and improvements as needed. So please do reach out if you think of anything that you think might improve the tool. And we'll definitely be making potential changes as we get input. But I just wanted to say, we did have a question about linking the tool to the assessment. As of now, I know it does not. And I don't know, Bob or Margaret, if you recall conversations. I also should have mentioned that for those of you who know Adam Coton, who was the Environmental Regulatory Affairs Director at Wine Institute prior to Noel, he's actually the one who helped to lead the development of this tool, which was really fantastic for us because he just knows so much about this area. So that was great. But, you know, has since moved on. So I'm wondering, Margaret or Bob, if you recall any conversations about that. But I don't think so, only because it's rather complicated to link tools.
Yes. So I'm no web expert, but I think the problem was, so linking the step 2 assessment to step 3, I think is probably what the question is revolved around. It was, since the step 3 had to be in Excel, that was just like a budgeting thing, I think, to make sure that was a separate piece. If it was web interface, maybe it'd be a little easier, but since the second piece there is in Excel, it was too big of an endeavor to try to link them. So.
Yeah, it became complicated. And then Kim, you mentioned, if we could transfer the action plans to the self-assessment action plan. So, that's a great point. And I think for any of you who are certified and, have to do annual action plans for your certification, you can literally just use that last action planning piece of the Excel that Margaret was just showing, where it's the summary of all your actions, and actually use that as your action plan for certification. So you don't actually need to transfer it into any other format. Like, that's literally the version that you could share with your auditor and use as your action plan for that year or years, depending on how involved those implementation steps are. So yeah, it's a great point. And especially for anyone who really does, dive into this, if you are getting any, helpful implementation ideas out of this, that would definitely fit right into your action planning for certification. Okay, and then back to this question for you, Noelle. Someone was asking if there's been any discussion on the challenges for the subsurface system to both meter daily winery effluent and effluent to subsurface disposal areas. So I don't know if you can see the questions too.
Yeah, this is Bob. I see the question there,
Okay.
and Diana, you absolutely nailed it, that this is a challenge for subsurface disposal systems. We brought this up during discussions with the state board, and yes, it will be a challenge. And I think the way I would advise approaching this is, there is some workaround in terms of being able to estimate your flows and documenting how you would do that, because you hit it exactly on, is that it's very difficult to measure open channel flow, especially in smaller systems, when all of this is underground and there's not a flow meter or a channel that's available. So this is a challenge that will be faced and will have to be addressed during the technical report filing. I would advise, at least upfront, looking at other ways to estimate what the wastewater might be. We often start with, well, do you have a good handle on what your water use is? And then is there an opportunity, if there are any pumped flows of wastewater, say there's a sump and then it's pumped to another location, putting a flow meter on that particular pumped flow. We've even done a runtime meter for estimating. So this is a challenge that'll have to be addressed. What's the best way for you, and in order to comply with the order?
Yeah, to add to Bob's comment, he's absolutely right. We spent hours and hours in discussions with the state board explaining some of the challenges of what was included in the order. And we did get a lot of changes, but we also didn't get a lot of changes. So this will be more a one-on-one negotiation with the regional board when you submit the technical report as to how you can make it work for your specific facility.
Great. Any other questions? I think we've covered them all. Great. Well, thank you all so much, Noelle, Bob, and Margaret. I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, for all of you listening in, once you get started using this tool, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or any feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for taking the time to learn about this today. Okay, take care. Thanks. Bye.